loves, and welcome back to another episode of Soulful Wahine. In today's episode, I'm going to be doing a deep dive into attachment theory and attachment styles. And we're going to be discussing today essentially how our experiences from childhood have shaped how we show up in our adult relationships. So, today's episode is here to help you understand the whys of your love life, meaning the whys behind your reactions, your needs, and even some of your fears. And I just want everyone to keep in mind that while we are discussing attachment, this is not about blaming our past, okay? But rather creating consciousness, creating awareness around our attachment style so that way moving forward, we can choose differently for ourselves. So, what is attachment theory? Attachment theory was developed by a British psychologist named John Bowlby. And essentially, John Bowlby believed that our relationships with our caregivers in our early childhood essentially give us the emotional blueprint that we walk into relationships with as adults. Okay? And attachment theory explores how our early relationships with these caregivers essentially shape the way that we view love, the way that we connect with others. And it shapes how we respond to intimacy as adults. Okay? The way that we attach to love now is 100% connected to what we did experience or maybe didn't experience with our caregivers in early childhood. And it simply all boils down to one question. Was it safe for you to depend on someone? So, through the lens of attachment theory, this is how we are impacted by it every single day. And we are impacted by it in 3 different ways. So it impacts how we view ourselves, how we view others, and how we view connection. Regarding how we view ourselves, that just means, do we feel like we are worthy of love? Do I believe that I matter? In regards to others, do we feel like we can trust other people or other people are trustworthy? Do I believe that people will show up for me when I need it? And lastly, regarding how we view connection, meaning, do we feel like connection with other people is safe? Or is that something that's threatening? Do we view closeness as a threat? Was love always something that was conditional for us? These are the ways and these are the areas that, again, through the attachment theory lens, we are impacted. As far as with attachment styles, for me, I view our attachment styles as essentially an emotional filter through which we experience intimacy, communication, conflict, and closeness. Okay? It was formed through experience, and one thing that I absolutely love about attachment styles is the fact that they are fluid, meaning just because you learned how to have one attachment style or just because you have a certain attachment style right now, that does not mean that you are stuck in that attachment style forever. No. With awareness, intention, and healing, we can shift how we show up in love, connection, and intimacy, which again means that whatever attachment style we have right now, it's not forever. If it's something that you want to change, the great news is you can. Now let's hop into talking about the different types of attachment styles. Okay? And within attachment theory, there are 4 main attachment styles. First one is secure attachment. Second one is insecure ambivalent attachment or anxious attachment. Third one is insecure avoidant attachment or dismissive avoidant. And the last one is disorganized attachment, or also known as fearful avoidant. I'm going to just be going over essentially quickly how each attachment style can be acquired, meaning I'm going to be touching on what your caregiver may have possibly been like in order for you to understand how you now have this attachment style. Okay? So the first one is secure attachment. If you have a secure attachment, that essentially just means that the caregiver or your parent consistently responded to the child's needs with warmth, reliability, and emotional presence. And so now for you, the child learned that love is safe and that their emotions matter, which then lead to trust, healthy boundaries, and comfort with intimacy as an adult. Next one is insecure ambivalent attachment or anxious. You could have possibly had a caregiver who was inconsistent, meaning sometimes they were very loving and responsive, and other times they were maybe distracted, overwhelmed, or even emotionally unpredictable. And so you grew up learning and thinking that you couldn't trust that love would be there. And as adults, we may crave closeness, we may feel anxious, clingy, or even afraid of abandonment. Next one is insecure avoidant attachment or dismissive avoidant. And for these folks, we might have grown up with a caregiver who was emotionally unavailable, dismissive, or even rejected some of our needs, especially when it came to vulnerability. And as a result, we learned that we cannot rely on anyone else. We learned that we can trust ourselves and that we are reliable, but other people are not. And so we learn to suppress our emotions to stay safe. And as adults, we tend to avoid intimacy and we tend to struggle to open up. And if we do find ourselves in connections, we tend to operate or we tend to be the type of people that would rather leave than be left. Does that make sense? And the final one is disorganized attachment or fearful avoidant. And so for those of us who have this attachment style, we may have grown up with a caregiver who was a source of both comfort and fear. Okay, so we may have grown up in a home where there was a lot of abuse, a lot of chaos, a lot of trauma happening. And for us, having those experiences as children, we learned and we experienced confusion and lack of clarity for connection. As adults, we may fear intimacy and push people away or even sabotage love due to unresolved fear or trauma. But at the same time, the difference between this attachment style compared to the other three is, in a sense, our brains learned how to do things. So for example, with the anxious attachment style, as children, we learned okay, we need to cling because we have that fear of abandonment. With avoidant, we learned, oh no, we're going to keep distance. We're going to push away. Because again, we learned that as children, we are safe, but our caregivers and other people may not be safe. So we're going to avoid closeness. Whereas when it comes to disorganized or fearful avoidant attachment style, as children, we did not learn which one to do, meaning we did not figure out whether we should cling or whether we should avoid. And so we do this thing that we like to call in the therapy world the push-pull dance. So again, we might push people away even though we really don't want them to leave. We may sabotage relationships or do things that put ourselves in negative positions in order, again, to kind of push people away, even though we still crave that love. And before we move on, I recognize that these things can be very heavy to hear. They can be very hard to hear. And so for any of you who are experiencing any feelings of discomfort or uncomfortability, I just ask that you sit with that. I ask that you get curious with it. And I just ask that you be compassionate and kind to yourself during this time. Because I know for me, when I was learning about attachment theory, I had a lot of guilt, just for one, being able to recognize my attachment style, and two, for recognizing that I felt a lot of guilt for naming things that my parents did that I never wanted to name out loud. And so for me, I just remember there was a lot of hard feelings that came up. And so if that is your experience, I just ask that again, try to sit with that discomfort and get curious with it. And as always, be compassionate. Okay? So I want to dive deeper into talking more about the 4 attachment styles. Okay? And I want to help you folks be able to understand possibly which attachment style you may have. So we're going to start with secure. So for those of us who have secure attachments, love feels safe. We are able to give and receive closeness. We trust easily. We're able to express our needs. And when we experience conflict with our partners, we are able to bounce back from that without shutting down emotionally. And so some signs that you may have secure attachment is you feel worthy of love. You can communicate your needs and wants openly. You aren't afraid of intimacy or closeness. And you're able to repair conflict without emotional spirals. For those of us who may have anxious attachment, love can feel uncertain for us. We crave closeness, but at the same time, we have this deep fear of abandonment. And we tend to often need reassurance, and we can feel anxious when someone close to us pulls away. Okay? And so some signs that you may have an anxious attachment is you overthink when someone doesn't respond. You struggle with fear of being too much or not enough. You attach quickly and struggle to let go. And you may lose your sense of self while in relationships. For those of us with avoidant attachment styles, love can feel pretty overwhelming for us. We tend to value independence and often pull away when someone gets too close. And so some signs that you may have an avoidant attachment is you struggle with vulnerability or opening up to others. You need space and feel suffocated in intimacy. You fear relying on others or even having others rely on you. And you shut down instead of communicating your needs. And lastly, disorganized. For those of us who have disorganized attachment, love can feel unsafe. We crave connection, however, at the same time, we fear it. There's often this push-pull dynamic going on, like I want you close, but I also don't feel safe with you. Okay? And so some signs that you may have disorganized attachment is you want intimacy, but at the same time, you are expecting rejection or betrayal. You sabotage relationships before they can hurt you. You experience emotional highs and lows. And you carry unresolved trauma or childhood chaos. And again, none of this is to judge ourselves. None of this is to pass shame on ourselves. Because, like I stated earlier, we did not choose our attachment styles. We learned them. Okay? From childhood, messages and things such as, don't cry, you're too sensitive, toughen up, or emotional unavailability from our caregivers, parentification. I know that is a very big one for a lot of us Polynesian women and just women of color in general. And inconsistent love. Your attachment style is not your fault, okay? It's honestly and merely a reflection of the emotional environment that you grew up in and had to adapt to. And for me, I am one of those people and one of those therapists that is a firm believer in, again, our attachment style is not our fault. Because when you look at attachment theory, at the very core of it, it talks about how our caregivers showed up for us or didn't show up for us. And so, as I had mentioned earlier, the great thing about attachment styles is with love, intention, healing, and time, we can change our attachment styles. And so I just hope that right now you recognize, sis, that this conversation is not about shame. It's about awareness. Okay? And I don't want you to judge yourself on the past or how you used to show up in love, in connections, or maybe even how you do show up, but now you have the awareness on that is something that you do. Don't judge yourself, okay? But rather get curious with it and be compassionate to yourself. Because again, sis, the more that we recognize our pattern, the more that we understand our patterns, it's going to be a lot easier for us to change them. And so I quickly just want to run through some tips that can help us with where we are at in our attachment styles. For those of us with secure attachment, maintain healthy boundaries and emotional openness. And just be mindful that we are not over functioning in relationships with insecure people. For those of us in anxious attachment styles, learn to self-soothe your nervous system first, sis, before seeking reassurance from outside sources. Okay? Build trust within yourself and remind yourself that your worth does not come from being chosen by someone. For those of us with avoidant attachment style, learn how to sit with emotional discomfort rather than shutting it down. Get curious with it. Learn how to let people in slowly. And also try to remember that intimacy does not equal losing yourself. And lastly, for those of us with disorganized attachment style, start by creating emotional safety within yourself. So things such as trauma-informed therapy, journaling, or somatic healing can help you to untangle fear from love and also help you to rebuild trust over time within yourself. And as always, I want to leave you all with some journal prompts. Okay? So first question is, which style feels most familiar and why? Second question, what messages did I receive about love growing up? Third question, how do I tend to react when I feel rejected or abandoned? And final question, what does secure love look like and feel like to me? Before we end, as always, I try to leave you folks with a book recommendation for any of those who want to try to continue their learning outside of the podcast. And so this week's book recommendation is called Attached by Amir Levine and Rachel Heller. I love this book because it is very beginner friendly, and it really helps break down attachment theory in a way that's easy to understand and very digestible for your everyday reader. I really like the book as well because it comes with examples, tools, and insights to help you better understand your own patterns in love. As always, it will be linked below in the show notes. And before we end, sis, I always want to leave you with a gentle reminder. Your needs are not too much. Your longing for connection is not weakness. And you were made for safe, soulful love. And that begins with how you love yourself. Next week, we're going to be talking about the topic of mothers, and we're going to be exploring the influence that they have on us. So the way our mothers' love, absence, or emotional patterns shape the way that we see ourselves, our bodies, and our worth. It's a deep one, sis, and I hope that you'll join me. If this week's episode helped you to understand yourself or your life a little more, give it a like and hit subscribe. Come find me on IG and let's have a conversation about it. And until next time, sis, mahalo and aloha.